there, welcome to the show. Today I'm going to talk about the Dark Crystal Labyrinth, two Jim Henson productions from the early to mid 80s, which were done after the massive popularity of the Henson film, Henson like Muppet movies, and the Muppets on TV and Sesame Street. So Henson started with Sesame Street and went into Muppets, but Sesame Street still kept going for decades. The Muppets have been on and off. The big hits because of entertainment value, but it's come and went really for popularity because for a while they were actually out of fashion. I mean, Muppets became something that kids like them, and then they grew out of them, and then they like them again. And in general culture, they like these characters, but a little goes a long way, and they've been rebooted a few times in bad ways, so then you've had some good reboots. So it just depends. There's some good films, some bad films with Muppets, but it's been an industry for a long time. Disney bought Henson's facility, and so all that stuff's now with Disney, which is good and bad. I mean, it means everything's kept and kept in good quality for the old stuff. It means some of the new stuff's not that inventive. So, but before all that stuff happened later with Disney after Jim Henson had died. But during the time where he was still alive, he was making films that he was trying to move away from the Muppets and move away from jokes. He was involved with these two films. I think he did some work in Return to Oz, which is another film came out in that time that was really dark. And, you know, he was trying to just to take the fans and age them up a little bit to give them other stuff that's not just jokes from the Muppets. And he took the idea that people liked Muppets and liked that kind of puppet animation thing to try and make more grown-up films. And it's a very strange thing that these films did well-ish, and after these two films, he went on to do Fraggle Rock, which is our TV show for kids, but there was a bit more. It's a bit different. And he did The Storyteller, which is just more stories. So he moved on. He kept on working. Apparently, he's a workaholic. But the things he made after the Muppets never had the same kind of cultural panache as the Muppets did, or the Sesame Street did. He peaked so early, and then it was like other things he was interested in didn't quite have the same effect on people, which happens with most like writers, directors. It's like certain films are going to connect and other things are not going to connect, and that's it. That's just the way life goes. But the good thing is nowadays, because of streaming, because of selling films on physical media, films that maybe did okay but not great can have a second life. They can be on TV. You can buy them and watch whatever you want. They can be on streaming. So that's where a lot of Henson stuff from the 80s got a second life, where because people had a chance to see them, you know, and had separated from the original broadcast, the original release, and just see the merits. And some films that maybe had some weaknesses, you could look past that and see what was good about it. So both these films, neither of them are perfect. Both of them have flaws, but the good stuff outweighs the flaws. And the thing is, during this time, George Lucas worked with Henson quite a lot, because you had Yoda being a Muppet basically, and you had because Lucas was into that kind of thing as well. So Lucas produced Labyrinth, you know, and he also produced Return to Oz, which Autobots directed, which I've done a video on before. So he was doing a lot at this time of some of these darker children's movies too. He also had Dragon Slayer, which came out a few years before these as well, which were a slightly darker take on these tales. You had Conan Barbarian. So while people were doing Star Wars, some people were actually doing darker versions of these fantasy tales. Because remember, like the Grimm fairy tales and all that were much darker. Not everything had to be Disney. In a way, now it all has to be Disney. So, to the films. The Dark Crystal came out first. It was originally it was based on an idea that Henson had with one of the animators, and it was turned into a screenplay which they shot. Henson and Frank Oz co-directed it, because Frank Oz was going to be a director, but at this point he was known as the voice of Miss Piggy and the voice of various people. Did the voice of Yoda. He was also a good puppeteer, so he was going back and forth between. He was trying to move on to do like live action films, but he also was very good at the puppet stuff, so the Muppet stuff. So he was going back and forth at this period. Later on, he would just move on and become a live action director and do some good films and some not so good films. You know, as many a mainstream career would go. He's done some films I really like, and he's done some films I'm like, what the hell was that? So, but at this point, both of them directed Dark Crystal, because I don't think Henson was quite sure if he could do it by himself, because there was so much work to be done. There was so many Muppets to animate, and there was just you can watch this film, you know, this is an ambitious project. They spent a lot of money. They basically they took over some sound stages and did everything within the sound stages for different sets, and there were some shots that took place in the outside world, but not many. So a lot of this was studio bound, and a lot of it looked like even the simplest stuff would take a lot of time to do, to perform all this stuff. So you can see this film costing a fortune. And the film came out, it cost a lot of money, it did well, it got its money back, so it allowed it to go and do Labyrinth, but it was not like a big cultural touchstone. Mainly because the story itself is interesting, almost as like a short story idea, and there's lots of wonderful bits in it, but it's not developed that great as a screenplay. Like, there's a hero's journey, which they take this idea of this young man who looks very androgynous as a puppet, so it's kind of weird to watch him have a romance with this other creature that's also from the same race as him, and both of them look kind of weirdly androgynous, so that's weird. She looks a bit more feminine than he does, but he does not look masculine at all. I think there's a point, but it was just basically, it was just strange to see. So he has to go now. Hero's journey. He's been protected by these older creatures, and they are trying to set him up to go and do this thing, to find this crystal shard that will go into the Dark Crystal and heal it so it's just a normal crystal that will bring the world back to what it needs to be. And most of the twists you can spot a mile away, because it does feel like a short story that's been expanded beyond what it is. There's the stuff in the middle feels like we need a hero's journey to expand a short story, but the short story doesn't feel like it needs expanding that way, so the whole backstory is more interesting than the actual story that's going through. And the whole world's more interesting than the story that's going through. The story that's going through is basically this kid on a mission. He runs into these other creatures to help him. They have a team that goes and basically saves the world. And that's basically all you need, really. It's a small team, it's like 3 people, but he gets some support and he runs into other cultures that need his help, and he has people to protect and people to save. All the basic tropes of a kind of hero learning to become a hero. But it's kind of like rote. It's not. It's interesting watching the puppets do all this stuff and having this world that's been set in a studio, and it feels very dark. The world does feel like it's the end of the world. It's like there's not much hope for anybody. So this depressing world and these puppets, and it just is a great atmosphere. The atmosphere is just so wonderful that you kind of forgive the fact that, and the villains have all these weird designs that all look great. The villains are all these creatures that are just greedy and attack each other and are horrible people, or horrible monsters, and they're fun. And you have this old crone who's the keeper of secrets. There's always one of those. So that's everything you're you'd guess. But there's also all these sets that are really inventively put together. You know, that feel kind of old fashioned from an older world, but feel they have a purpose to them. And you've got the river journeys, you've got climbing mountains and things. All of that is impressively done. And because it's a studio, it feels unique and different because it's not trying to be reality. Every so often they have to have a small person in a suit to do certain stunts or to do some walking things, and it just always looks a bit odd. Like, you know what it is. Your eyes can tell exactly what it is. But you can forgive that. You can forgive the kind of obvious midsection where there's not much invention going on with some of the cliches they're using. All because the world's great, and even though you figure out what the ending's going to be, it still pays off. It's still very nicely done. And just the atmosphere is wonderful. So I highly recommend it as long as you're willing to look through flaws. Because the world itself is beautiful. So now we're going to Labyrinth, which is the follow-up to the Dark Crystal. This one there was another one that came and went, did okay, but then this one did really well, like on like other media, like video, VHS. It's one of those films that in Britain it always feels like it's always on TV. The Dark Crystal less so because it's darker and it comes on sometimes, but you feel it's not that big a deal. This one, which is more mainstream, has more jokes, comes on TV more. It's easier for the audience. I like Dark Crystal more, but this one's well done. But there are more jokes in it, which was intentional because the view was Dark Crystal went a bit dark. You know, so it lived up to his title. So this one is about this young woman, played by Jennifer Connelly, very young Jennifer Connelly, just after she'd done Once Upon a Time in America. And this was before, and she'd done Creepers or Phenomena. But this was like her first like American finance movie before she go on and have her career. Because she's one of those actors who was always in stuff over the years before she really made a name for herself. She's always an actress who's always like there. She's always kind of in film. She would be in like a variety of films, lower budget, higher budget, Dark City, things like that. But this is her early part where it's that thing is when you see someone who's an actor who's very established now, but you see them in the early films, they're still learning. They're still learning the job. And it's just one of those things, it's like they're always going to be criticised. Like, I think she got pretty savage with some people, and other people liked her, so it's like one of those things. I thought she was good for a kind of young adult performer in this one. The part itself is written kind of so. It's okay. It gets from A to B. Again, it's not a quest movie. This one's more interesting because she is fairly bitchy at the start and isn't the most sympathetic character and tries to learn to be a better person by running to people, by helping people, and she's trying to find her brother. She says that she has to babysit her brother and in a melodramatic teenage thing. I wish the Goblin King would come and take my brother. And he turns up as David Bowie and takes her brother. So she has to go into the labyrinth and try and get her brother back. And when she's in the labyrinth, she has to deal with these creatures. Some of whom are initially villainous, who are looking for a friend, so they end up coming around to her side. There's other ones who are trustworthy from the start. There's one who's a fox who just wants a quest. He wants a quest. He's always ready for a fight. There's a big creature who everyone thinks is mean, but it turns out he's just a big softy. There's a whole bunch of characters. They're into a swamp where it stinks horribly. There's mountains they almost fall off. There's a whole variety of traps they have to get through, and the labyrinth itself goes everywhere, and there's lots of puzzles they have to solve. So there's lots of stuff going on. It's much more child friendly. It's like the problem with Dark Crystal was there wasn't enough instant in the middle part. And this one they figured that out. You have to have actual challenges. You can't just have this character float towards the conclusion and get some helping, but not have much challenge. This time she gets challenges, and she has to learn from her mistakes. Terry Jones wrote the original draft, and then he was replaced by other people. A lot of people came in and wrote for this film, and you can feel that there's like times when it feels that there's one vision, times you feel there's lots of stuff thrown in. Like, we need to have this scene and this scene. Jim Henson directed this himself, and I think actually the Dark Crystal was better directed. It had a worse script. Dark Crystal had a worse script, but a really good idea behind it. But it was the direction kept it going. This one, I think the script is better, even though there's stuff thrown into it. But the direction's not quite as good. Like, it's busier, but that doesn't mean it's better. And David Bowie is a great visual presence, but he's not really a threat as a villain. He's just like he's surrounded by Muppets a lot of the time. He's stolen a child, and they don't find a way to make him actually scary. He's just a threat that they have to deal with. So that's the kind of thing that the film has going against it, is the big bad threat in this one isn't much of a threat. In the Dark Crystal, they weren't much of a threat either, but they were interesting. This one, less interesting. And but the sequences are more inventive as you go along, and in lots of ways it's more enjoyable as a narrative, but it's not as unique as a world as Dark Crystal. So you get pluses and minuses. You have a better lead character, you have better adventure, but the world's not quite as strong. And the ending of Dark Crystal was better. The end of this one feels like kind of like a cop out, and the character gets everything she wants, and it's like, I'm sure the kids would like that, but I like my kind of dark fantasy tales to have some darkness at the end, so you remember them more. So it's very enjoyable, but it has its demerits too. But both these films are from a period that I have some sentimentality towards, because it was the early 80s, and the kids' film in the early 80s seemed to be able to traumatise the kids. I remember, because I was a kid in that time, and you never knew you were going to get in these films. Nowadays, kids' films feel really soft in comparison. It didn't feel like the directors were out to harm you nowadays. Well, in the past, yeah, they were out to really... It was like the motto of scare little buggers, and they succeeded. Neither of these films are as traumatic as Return to Oz, which was the big trauma film in my childhood for, like, it is dark. It goes all in the darkness. These two don't quite as much, but, you know, they are fun. And they're both films I missed as a child. I understood the style of them, but I missed them as a child. I don't know how I missed them, but I did. So it's quite nice to watch them now and appreciate them. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it gets you to go and watch both these films. They are well made, they are interesting, they are worth your time. So that's me for now. I'll see you later. Right, bye.